Hello, and welcome back to the YouTube channel where we build cars. Sick intro. Today, we have 5 new boxes of goodies. Box number 1 from the homies at Deechworks. They sent over a set of DW 1200s. 1200s, not very small. We also have a fuel pump from Deechworks. I think it's a DW 300. So like a 3040 LPH, which should be plenty for what we're gonna do. This ain't no 800 wheel. We just want like four to five, somewhere in there. And then Radium hooked it up with a lot of goodies as well. And we're gonna go ahead and open these up right now, actually. In box number 1, we have fuel rail plumbing kit. We run, I believe, the same exact kit on Bobby's STI, and it's very nice. So we have a bunch of fuel line. Speaking of Bobby, hello Bobby.
Hello Devin.
What's going on, brother?
And I'll leave in your mother's.
I understand. Okay, goodbye. Fuel line, all the fittings, comes with the very nice Radium regulator, and this should be the gauge, fuel pressure gauge. Let's do this one. Radium fuel rails. These are a must-have for what we were doing because on our intake manifold over here, it's a side feed setup, so we had to buy new rails and some other goodies as well. So these are the rails that we got. Next up, I didn't know Christmas came in November. Beautiful. Radium TGV housings, billet, black. Just look at how sick that setup is. Straight fire with some bolts included as well. Last Radium item is something, I'm not even gonna lie, I didn't even know they made this, so you guys may not know either. This is a Radium air oil separator setup. And just like every other Radium part in the world, the quality of this is just insane. We're building a Subaru here, which does Subaru things, so an AOS is highly recommendable for multiple reasons. But dang, this thing is nice. Big thank you to Radium, big thank you to Deechworks. I'll have both of them linked down below. Both of those companies always have our back for whatever part we need, and they ship it out insanely fast. Like I think they shipped this stuff yesterday, Radium did, because I was like, I need these parts real quick. They shipped them out yesterday. They arrived this morning, and the reason we needed them so fast is so we can get this motor back together and get the dang thing in the car. Huge thank you to both of those companies. I'm not sure if we're gonna get around to installing all of these parts today, but I just wanna show you what came in the mail because the funnest part about living life is opening boxes. Also, Prismatic Powder sent over some Desert Wrinkle Red, and you already know this is gonna be for our intake manifold. Today's main goal is to get the motor or the engine. What do we call this thing? Engine or motor? That's like the most disagreed upon thing I've ever heard in my life. Whatever, I call it both. Main goal is to get the thing ready to go back in the car, meaning we need to get the whole intake manifold on with the new TGV housings, injectors, a wiring harness, pretty much this whole assembly right here, but we need to rebuild it all first because these are side feeds and the injectors that we have are top feed. So we had to get the Radium setup, which I'm super stoked to have anyway. But we are gonna repowder coat the intake manifold. This thing's really, really crusty, peeling paint, peeling powder coat, whatever it is. We're gonna pull off all of these fuel lines because we don't need the stock ones on here. There's some other stuff we're gonna pull off. This little purge solenoid here we don't need. So there's a few things that we're gonna do to this intake manifold setup. First thing is completely disassemble it down to nothing, down to just the intake manifold itself. And we are gonna repowder coat this Wrinkle Red, Desert Wrinkle Red from Prismatic Powders. I'm curious to see how close to factory STI Wrinkle Red this is gonna be. So I guess we'll see. Let's get this thing torn apart. It would be really fun to go through and cut everything off that we don't need. I know there's gonna be a lot of this stuff that we're not gonna be using, like stuff for the top mount intercooler brackets we probably won't use. I know that nipple there we don't use, but I don't know which ones we still need, so I don't want to start cutting stuff off and shaving the intake manifold and then come to find out like we need this for something. This guy is ready to go in the powder coat strip tank. It's probably paint on here is what I'm guessing. Should strip really, really easily. Let's get her dunked in. In the matter of 12 seconds, it's already coming off. 1 minute later, we have a silver intake manifold. Yay! I'm trying to decide on what color we should do the compressor housing for our turbo. Three options. Three things come to my brain right now. What we discussed yesterday with matching the brake to the candy red. Problem there, nothing else in the engine bay is going to be candy red. There's a lot of red, but no candy red. There's obviously the wrinkle red of the intake manifold. So that's option number 2 is wrinkle red, or option 3 is wrinkle black. And the cool thing about this situation is when we pull the motor back out to put the 2.5 in there, and if we hate what we decide right now, we can always change a few things later on down the road. I do think right now the best option is going to be to go ahead and match the intake manifold with the wrinkle red. So that is what we're gonna do. Let's go ahead and get that thing out of storage. We gotta sandblast the intake manifold and sandblast the compressor housing, and we can go ahead and get both of those powder coated at the same time. Here's what the intake manifold looks like straight out of the oven. Very, very warm. Okay, still really shiny. And here's the turbo, fully cooled down. That's gotta be pretty dang close to factory STI. I'm gonna bring this Turbski home, just this compressor housing here, and I'm actually I'll compare it to Bobby's intake manifold, a little side by side to see how close it actually is. But I think if you're going for a OEM Subaru color, this has gotta be it. Desert wrinkle red from Prismatic, which I will have linked down in the description box below if you guys want to pick some up. That looks sick. I think it's gonna look good. Actually, let's see how good it'll look. Was wrinkle red the right call? Comment below. All right, well, I'm gonna run through and get this whole harness cleaned up. I'm just gonna give it a good degrease, pressure wash, blow her off with compressed air, and we should be good. The intake manifold has a little bit more of a shine, honestly, overall, versus the turbo. And I'm not exactly sure why, but it still looks really, really, really nice. I'm gonna go ahead and get it assembled with the radium TGV housings. So they're gonna sit on there like that. Get some wiring ran real quick, and maybe a few other things installed. I just ran to the parts store and picked up some new gaskets because I forgot to order them earlier. Radium includes the intake manifold to head, but not intake to or I guess it'd be TGV to head, but not intake to TGV. So we went and picked some up. Let's get this guy assembled, and then we can get her on to the engine. It's only one half of the intake manifold that's shinier than the other. So this is the front. The front's a lot more flat. This is the back. That's more of a wrinkle finish. The reason why is because we had it hanging in the oven like this. So this side was toward the top of the oven, probably baking at the temperature it needs to be. This side was right above that lower heater element, and it probably got way too hot and made it shiny. So we should probably upgrade our oven. So I'm having a weird issue. It appears the injectors are too tall, or too short, because the rail's bolted down and it's all 08 stuff. Say if this was not an 08 STI manifold, it wouldn't matter because everything's bolted onto the TGVs. The fuel rail is bolted down onto the TGV housings. And as you can see, it's like it needs a spacer in there somehow. Do we have a spacer laying around that I didn't see? I went ahead and just assembled both sides. I did message Radium to see if they offered a shorter spacer. It's too short if we take the spacer out. It's a 20 mil spacer right in between the rail and the housing. So they must have, I'm guessing they have different size spacers for maybe a different brand of injectors. I'm not really sure. I've never ran into this issue before, but it's not a big deal because thankfully with this Radium setup, it's gonna be so easy to access when the engine's in the car. So even if we have to wait a few days, not really that big of a deal. We can go ahead and pull out our engine and start messing around getting this guy installed onto the engine with a harness, and we can deal, or start dealing with at least, getting everything plumbed up with our plumbing kit. Intake manifold and harness is back on the engine. I actually just went ahead and pulled those spacers out. They have a 27 mil, 20 mil, which is what we had, the 20 mil, 15 mil, and an 11 mil spacer. We need the 11 millimeter. So for now, we just kind of snug these two bolts up. Of course, we're not gonna run like that forever, but I would rather have it not leak and just at least be able to start it and run the car. Thankfully, Radium is down in Oregon. We're in Washington, so it's like 1 day shipping, not a big deal. But if we get this motor in the car, I wanna get it fired up and not have to worry about fuel leaks right there. So pull the spacers out for now, we should be good. I'm gonna go ahead and slap on these plug and play harnesses that DeechWorks provided. So these should connect right from the DW1200s right back to the factory wiring on our STI harness. All right, next up is the Perrin turbo inlet. She should slide in right underneath the intake manifold like that. I want to keep this wiring as clean as possible, so I'll probably tuck it down there. We do need to clean off some powder here, and what goes there is that ground, but it can't be grounded to powder. So that guy should chill just like that. It'll connect to the turbo right back there. So much nicer than the factory unit. Beautiful. What is next? Should we start messing around with some fuel system stuff? We might have to do some of it while the engine is in the car, because obviously we have to mount the fuel pressure regulator and whatnot, and that's all going to be mounted in the engine bay, not on the engine anywhere. I actually might, I'll start messing around with it. We can get it ran from rail to rail, but to get it 100% complete, the engine definitely has to be up in the car. Okay, so right now I'm going through, Radium has a really good write-up on how their whole plumbing kit works. So I just have the regulator assembled right now. They included a nice little, pretty beefy bracket for it, which is pretty cool. On all of these O-rings, you need to put a little bit of oil on them, just so they slide in nice and easy. so you don't pinch them at all. And the gauge sits on the regulator just like that, which is it's really nice. It's a really neat setup. So there's two different ways to plumb these cars, in parallel or in series. I know on Bobby's car, it's the opposite of what we're doing here. So on this car, or on this kit that we ordered, there's no line that runs from the front of the rail to the front of the rail. On Bobby's car there is, on this car there's not. So this is gonna connect, so this is how the rails are set up. It's plugged on the end, there's a plug on the bottom, and on the back there's a swivel on both sides, driver and passenger. So I know this is gonna run up when we have this mounted on the car, and it's gonna mount, and there'll be a hose connecting to, I'm not sure exactly which one of those 120-degree elbows. And then the other side as well, the passenger side, is gonna have a hose running along the back and connect to the other side swivel. And then these guys here, I'm actually gonna go ahead and do this right now. I'm gonna lower the car down and get this mounted in the car, but these are gonna connect to our factory fuel lines that run back to the fuel pump. So it should be a pretty simple setup. To be honest, this is way easier than the setup that we have on Bobby's car. It's a little bit cleaner as well because we don't have a hose in front. Not like it's a big deal, but just something little to note. Let's pull this thing down and we can get the regulator and some of the lines ran. The two lines that are gonna run, of course, back to the rails, we'll have to do those when the engine's actually in the car, which I don't wanna put the engine in until we get the turb ski on, which might be tomorrow. So I believe the regulator setup mounts right on this strut tower, right up in here somewhere. I'm guessing right there. Now that right there is such a clean, nice location. Such a beefy bracket too, it really doesn't move. The gauge is mounted on a swivel so we can tighten it wherever we want. If we want to sit in like that, or if we want to sit in like that, I'll probably just go straight up and down. But now we just need to connect these lines back here. So these two are going to run back to our factory lines. This car isn't going to make enough power to warrant running dash 8 and dash 6. The factory lines are going to be plenty enough for this thing. So as you can see, just a nice little short jump from the regulator up to the factory lines. Let's go ahead, get some lines made and get those bad boys installed. So these are gonna go on the factory hard lines like that. So now we just need to build the two lines that are gonna run from those radium fittings down to our regulator. Lines are built. That's about the most simple, clean setup that you can have. Not much else we can do except for one last thing. I was telling you guys earlier, I've never even seen these radium AOSs before. I'm super glad I found it. And I'm very, very curious to see where this guy mounts. I'm gonna guess on the other strut tower. I was right, it looks like it's gonna mount right up in here, which is gonna be a very nice and clean setup. One thing that's cool with the AOS, we're gonna run it the same way that we ran it on Bobby's car. So this is kinda, what's the best way to explain this? This almost essentially turns into our coolant expansion tank, which also means we delete the coolant expansion tank, which is that guy right there. We no longer need to run that, so that really cleans up the top of the engine. I think it's kinda ugly looking. So pretty much all four of these mounts right here, I don't think we need. We could have shaved them off. Maybe I'll do, maybe if I get bored one day, I'll pull the intake manifold. I'll identify each mount that we need. All the other ones, we could probably shave off. That might be kind of fun. I know we don't need that one either. I feel like that was a very, very, very short video, very short day. But until we get this turbo or a turbo for the car, which I think we should be able to get something figured out tomorrow, there's not much else we can do, to be honest. Next step, turbo install on the motor. Motor goes back in the car and we fire it up and we drive the dang thing. and then we put a ton of mods on it, which is gonna be fun. I'll have every single thing that we just opened up, all the 4 different Radiant products. I'll have the Deechworks injectors linked down below, and I'll also go ahead and link this wrinkle red powder coat down in the description box below as well. Actually, you know what? I gotta compare this to Bobby's manifold real quick. So let's pop back to the house and see how she compares.